Welcome to Amy Learns to Cook. On the show today, we're going to make bread machine honey white bread. This bread is very simple to make because the bread machine does all the hard work in making the dough. We're going to take the dough out, shape it, let it rise, and bake in the oven. This bread is soft, delicious, and perfect for sandwiches. So join me as we make bread machine honey white bread. Okay, so really quick about the bread machine. They're really easy to use. This is a Bread Man. It's a 2.5 pound bread machine. I love the Bread Man. The one I usually use is a 2 pound bread machine ultimate, but I also have this one, so I figured I'd drag it out today and see how it does with the dough. Pretty much it's got a thing up here where you can put things if you want to drop in some raisins or something like that. On the menu, it's very easy. You just choose the desired cycle that you want depending on the type of the bread, the color, whether you want a light, medium, or dark crust. You can increase the times, the loaf size, and you just hit start. The pan looks basically like this. It has the paddles in it. These paddles, if you were going to bake the bread in the bread machine, it has these little collapsible paddles that are supposed to keep it from getting too big of a hole in the bottom. That really doesn't matter to me because I don't really bake it too much in the bread machine, only when I'm really want to set it and forget it bread. I usually basically use it as a dough machine. I make the dough in here, I take it out, I shape it, I let it rise again, and I put it in the oven. This way I can have it the shape I want, whether I'm making bread, rolls, whatever. So let's put our ingredients into the bread pan. Okay, so now we're going to put our ingredients in our bread pan. The very first thing that we are going to use is 1 1/3 cups of warm water. Now you want water that's about 110 degrees. You need something that's warm enough to activate the yeast, but you don't want it to be too warm because it will kill the yeast. And it's very important to measure your water properly. We are going to adjust it a little bit when it's inside the bread maker, and we're going to either add a little flour or a little water depending on how our dough looks. You always are going to have to do that because humidity, the heat, the cold is always going to affect, and your flour is going to affect how it takes in that moisture. So the way I do water is fill your liquid measuring cup and make sure you put it down on the counter and lean down to verify that it measures exactly at the right level. So we want 1 1/3 cups, 110 degree water. And next we're going to use 1/3 cup of olive oil. I like using olive oil over refined oils. It's just better for you. It's cold pressed and it's really delicious, and it doesn't really leave an olivey taste to it. At least I don't think so. Okay, so the next thing we're going to put in is a little bit of salt, and you really want some salt because otherwise the bread will be bland. You want 2 teaspoons of salt. So we're going to put that into our bread pan. And then we're going to put in 3 tablespoons of honey. Now make sure you get pretty good honey. There are honeys out there that aren't really honey. Some of it is just basically sugar water. So next we're going to put in 4 cups of bread flour. And bread flour is a little different than all-purpose in that it has a higher protein content. With this bread, you want a nice sturdy bread, so you don't want to use all-purpose. You want to use a higher protein level bread, and that is bread flour. So buy fresh flour that's labeled as bread flour, a good quality brand. Definitely don't want to sift it, right? Because sifting is really for cakes. It makes it light. We don't want it really light. We want it hearty, right? So we're definitely not going to sift our flour. Okay, so we're going to make a little well inside here to hold our yeast. And one of the things is you need to put this in the order called for in your bread machine's manual. My bread machine wants me to put all the liquid, salt, and sugar at the bottom, and the yeast, then the flour, then the yeast above the flour. This is so that the yeast and the sugar and the salt stay away from each other as long as possible. Okay, so now we're going to put in our yeast. And what I use in my bread machine is just plain active dry yeast. There is yeast on the market called bread machine yeast, and basically it's turbocharged yeast. Technically the difference is active dry you're supposed to proof. You're supposed to put it in a little warm water and let it start doing its thing for a little bit before you put it into your bread. I never really have a problem with it rising. Sometimes it'll like way over rise, particularly with this bread and the amount of yeast I'm using. So I would go ahead and get regular active dry yeast. If you really like the instant or bread machine yeast, you know, go ahead and use that. I haven't tested this recipe with that because I generally just use active dry. So we're going to use 3 teaspoons of yeast. And we're just going to put that on top of our flour, making sure the yeast stays separate. This is particularly important because some bread machines have a delay timer. So if you mix it all together, the yeast would activate way too early for the delay timer. So make sure that you put them in there in the order that your bread machine recommends. Okay, so we're going to put our pan into the bread machine. This is what makes it so easy. You got to make sure it's all the way down there so your paddles get activated. We're going to close the lid down and we're going to set our bread machine to the dough setting. In mine on this, we're going to set it to cycle number 10. It has white, rapid white, whole wheat, rapid wheat, French, sweet, rapid sweet, gluten-free, quick bread, dough, low carb, jam, and bake only. I think if you're going to use the instant or bread machine yeast, you would go with rapid white or rapid wheat. I never use those because I don't use that. I just use regular active dry. Because I like to just take my yeast, if I'm going to make bread in the mixer or bread in the bread machine, I like to just have one kind of yeast. So I just use active dry. So we're going to put it on the dough cycle. And we're going to go ahead and turn this baby on. And the bread machine's going to do what it does. It's going to knead, it's going to mix, it's going to knead, it's going to rise, it's going to punch it down, it's going to rise again. When you start seeing the dough come together on the first cycle, it's mixing and it's starting to knead, we're going to open it up real quick and verify that it's the right feel to the dough. You don't want it too wet, you don't want it too sticky, and you don't want it dry. And it really depends on your humidity, your heat, your flour, whether or not you're off a little bit on the water. So that's when we'll adjust it so we'll get the proper consistency to the dough. So we're going to let the bread machine go for a little bit, and then we'll check the consistency. Okay, our bread is done, and in our bread machine it takes an hour and a half for this to happen, and it looks risen and delicious, right? So we're going to get this out. And we're going to take the dough out. The dough is punching down basically on its own, just from being moved around. So we're going to get this dough out of here and we're going to shape it. So now we're going to roll out our bread. Get the bread out of the pan. And this is a very beautiful dough. Let me take my rings off really quick. And we're just going to knead it a little bit. You don't have to knead it too much. The bread machine did a really good job kneading it. It's a nice big loaf. And we're just going to shape it into a little loaf like this. And we're going to put it into a loaf pan. And this is going to rise up really, really nicely. And we have our loaf shaped and in this loaf pan. We're going to go ahead and cover this up, and we're going to put it kind of in a warm place. And we're going to let it rise until it's going to basically double in size. It's going to take about 30-40 minutes. Our bread has risen and it looks beautiful. Wow, look at that. It's risen twice what it was before, and it is just completely gorgeous. So we're going to put this in our oven at 350. And it's going to cook anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes. What you want to look for is a nice golden brown. When you tap on it, you're going to get a hollow sound throughout the bread. That'll let you know that it's done in the middle. And you can butter the top if you want to. We might do that. We'll see how it goes. But 350 in the oven, and we're going to take this out, and we're going to have some beautiful bread. Okay, so the bread has been in there about 30 minutes, and we are going to butter it real quick. We want to butter it when it's almost done. It's looking really good. It has risen really, really high. So we're going to put a little butter on it. Butter is going to shine it up, and it's going to give it a nice little taste to it. I just had it in the oven for just a couple minutes. I don't want to get it too brown. And we're going to go ahead and take it out. Wow, it looks beautiful. It's risen really, really high. And we're going to go ahead and pop it out of here. We don't want it to continue cooking too long. So we're going to pop it out of here. Hopefully I won't burn myself. And we're going to flip the bread over. Wow. It is huge. Looks good. It's nice and golden brown. We got it a little brown, but I kind of like that. And it's hollow sounding. So we're going to let this cool. We'll see how long we can let it cool before Eric dives into it. The best thing is to let it cool completely, then the bread will have a chance to set up. But I just have this feeling that this thing might get cut with a little butter on it before we even get to that stage. Okay, so it's just a little bit warm. Eric seems to not be able to wait. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this baby. This is an offset bread knife. You really need to use a serrated knife when you're cutting bread. Otherwise, you're just going to squish it. You need a nice serrated knife. So we're going to go ahead and get some slices here. Sometimes I don't exactly cut it like every slice perfectly. You can get a bread slicing guide. It's like a piece of plastic, and you put your bread in there and you slice it with little guides, so it helps you keep your slices even. And we're going to butter a piece of this up, and Eric's going to take a taste.
I'm going to clue you in on a little secret. I've already smelt this stuff, but just to be official, I say it's a keeper. So we're going to taste it here, right? Now that we've got it buttered, let's take a taste. Can't do it, so I just have to whip it this hard way. The crust is definitely, I don't know, ideal. It's not hard and it's not soft. The middle is definitely soft. It's a little more weight to it than like Wonder Bread, but it's not like a hard type of a bread. It's got a lot of taste from like the yeast and stuff. A thumbs up.
If you like this recipe, please subscribe below and leave a comment. And log on to my website at amylearnstocook.com. I'm also on Twitter and Pinterest at Amy Learns to Cook.